Hi, my name is Carl Cuesta with Assisted Living Rookie. Here today with a very special guest. Can you introduce yourself to us?
Yes, my name is Kimberly Rodriguez, and so former state licensing inspector, and I'm definitely glad that you welcomed me to, and I'm happy to be here to share information with you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Um, Tell us more about being an inspector. How long ago was that, and how does that fit into the assisted living facility puzzle?
Okay, so I was a state inspector for 10 years in one of the most heaviest regulated states in Virginia, and that was about 3 years ago. Before I became a full-time assisted living and adult programs consultant. And so the bulk of what I did was definitely teaching the education. So we did teaching those about standards and regulations and things like that. I did a lot of enforcement action case hearings and court hearings, closing facilities, issuing sanctions, of course, citations, violations, and things like that. Desk appeals. But the overall and the largest piece of it is working with adult protective services and working with individual assisted living owners to get them licensed to own to operate the actual facility. So overseeing that process beginning to end, reviewing their policies, their procedures, reviewing all of the paperwork that's necessary to actually get them to have a license and be secured, and then doing those follow-up visits and making sure that they're staying in compliance. Um, and so, of course, I feel like how that fits into the assisted living puzzle. I feel like that's the biggest piece of it. Because it's we're gonna enforce, and we're gonna make sure that things are consistent. We're gonna make sure that residents are safe. Um, and I think we're oftentimes called and known as the hammer.
The hammer of safety. That's what that is.
Definitely.
Well, that's
Um,
that's uh that's amazing. Like that seems like you do a bulk of the work. Like, how does that usually work out? Like, are you the one going with them to these different hearings, or are you just guiding them through like Zoom or something? Like, how does that, like, what is it like to work with you as a client?
okay, um, so one thing about my company is we're a one-stop shop, and
Mhm,
that's what I want it to be. So but also I thrive and pride myself that I'm very relational, so I'm very one-on-one.
mhm,
And so most of the times when I'm doing like when I meet a client, and it's actually in my agreement that I meet with them physically in person one at least one time, or on site on their property at least one time. And that's why I'm kind of always on the go, because I need to be able to connect with you, and I need to be able to be in the room with you, because I do not accept all clients.
mhm.
So when it comes to the case hearings and court presentations, I will always physically be there because
Okay.
I'm typically the one that's actually doing the representation. A lot of times, specifically for special use permits, I find that a lot of times individuals they're not equipped in terms of regulatory terminology, of course, but or nor able to provide enough information and be able to dissect the information that's provided in terms of what the planning committee is requiring, things like that. So oftentimes they slip up. They may say too much information, they may not give enough information, hence then having the application being denied. So I believe my background, I appeal to um a lot of different audiences. And so, when I'm going there to give a presentation or on the panel, you have the attorney, which I trained specifically under our Commonwealth attorney. So when I did a lot of my actual case presentations, it was a Commonwealth attorney. You have your regulatory officials, which we use regulatory guidelines and base things off of factual evidence and regulation code. So when I speak with those individuals, we speak strictly in code enforcement language. And
Okay.
so those are your fire marshals, any about your coding, those who are doing your zoning and the actual codes, um, those officials, we speak in a certain language.
Hmm.
And then I'm a social worker. So when I go to these case hearings, what happens is they have the opportunities for, individuals to come and speak and share or, address questions and concerns. Being the social worker aspect of it, there's I see the scope of everything. So I'm overseeing that I can answer the questions about wound care, about the cognitive impairment, about the counseling, depression, transfer trauma, the nursing, the medical aspects of it.
That's
And so,
a lot.
yeah, definitely. So I feel like I just, I can kind of check every part on the list. So that's why definitely I go to represent, because I can address each question and speak it in language that that specific person understands.
Now you mentioned like a presentation, like you mean you're actually giving like a presentation to this panel of regulatory officials in a
Ye-
in a setting like in a
mm,
town hall setting or something like that, or
Yeah. So what I do is I try to give a presentation, because a lot of times what happens is when specifically for special use permits,
Mhm.
you have your state licensing entity, and the terminology that we use for the state licensing entity does not, 9 times out of 10, does not match locality,
Mhm.
right? So what happens is the term group home is often used for various different programs. So specifically when you're doing a special use permit, people like the neighbors and everything, they're thinking group home is mental health,
Yes.
which honestly, that is typically what it is. That is typically what it is. But what you have is your zoning codes and your enforcement applications. They don't break down the specific program. They only use for this specific this specific location. They only use the term group home.
Mhm.
However, we wanted to operate an adult foster care, which is not group home. Adult foster care is similar to assisted living. The only difference is the owner of the property resides in the home exactly like a child foster care.
Okay.
So the presentation, so what I do is I give a presentation because I want everybody to have an understanding, a clear understanding of what the program is that we're presenting, because I think there's a lot of confusion and a lot of just miscommunication.
Mhm.
So getting them to understand, and it is easier for me to give a visual and for me to be able to walk people through it so they feel more comfortable with our actual proposal to use that facility as such.
Now, like this sounds like it's a process. Like, how long does this usually take, like from start to finish? Like, let's just say in Texas. I don't know. I don't know if it's different in different states or not.
Yeah. Are you saying for the SUP or to open a facility?
To just let's say just from starting to get to that point. What about that? And then from
Okay.
starting to finish, like
Okay.
to opening.
Texas to me is the longest state. I operate out of multiple different states,
Mhm.
multiple. Texas can take up to 18 months.
Wow.
Um, if you do not use a consultant. If you do use a consultant, then we can kind of speed things up for you.
Mhm.
And we can usually get you licensed in about 9 months. Um, the if you have to have a special use permit, that is going to hold you up. It takes a little bit longer because you have to go through that process first. Other states, because I've done probably over 19 states, and that's probably where I work with. I found Virginia to be the quickest. Virginia takes 30 days.
Wow.
Um, Actually, there's some other places. There's Michigan as well. Let's see. Can you see me on there? Okay.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
Michigan as well, and I understand Michigan as well, because Michigan actually you can have a very high capacity before it's even actually required to have a license. So most states actually require, no more than 2 or 3 residents in care, and then you need to be licensed.
Mhm.
Um, Michigan, it's kind of very different. You can actually go very high number without before you actually need a license.
Chicken it is for some of our viewers, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Okay, well, this is a lot of really important information. Now, you mentioned like having like meeting with regulatory officials in different localities. Do you have like a team on the ground that finds these officials? Or this is something that you personally set up meetings with, and that's you meet them on that day, like the team that you need to address these officials?
So, I have found actually most of the time the city officials are actually reaching out to me to come to actually clarify something for them.
Okay.
So they have usually, I don't actually reach out to meet with them. They have usually seen me somewhere to give a presentation or something. Um, or the specific one that you probably saw with the posting, this was, I was representing a client, and it just so happened that there's an influx of a lot of applications for the same exact program.
Okay.
When the city official met with me at that time, which I was mind blown. They invited me to come to do a presentation, actually behind closed doors. And it was so funny because my client calls me. She says, "Oh my goodness," she says, "the attorney is going to be there. They said that they want their attorney there." And I said, "Well, okay, that's no problem." I was like, "You haven't done anything wrong." I was like, I said, "It's fine." And but I was really excited. They wanted to come, they wanted their attorney to be there to get the understanding and that their actual application really had not been updated and had not evolved the way that assisted living communities were evolving.
Mhm.
And when I sat there with them, the attorney was like, this is the city attorney, and he's like, I understand. He was like, "This is really a good program. You're doing a really good justice." And he was like, "This is encouraging us to review our documentation, to go back to review it and actually change some of the zoning codes to make
Wow.
it in compliance. Yeah, to make it in compliance to match actual state information." And so that's where you have just your state and your locality, they're not communicating, so the information doesn't really transcribe.
Hmm.
Um, So most of the presentations I give, it's actually, they've actually made me to come out, or specifically, my client, for instance, I do tax abatement presentations, for new builds of assisted livings and things like that.
Mm.
Um, or I'll do presentations for proposals, like expansion projects, um, and to kind of clear up anything that they may, not have a clear understanding.
Wow. That's you need a team for this, or someone that knows how to put it together for sure. I mean, just the fact that it goes from 18 months to about 9 months with a consultant, that's yeah, that's a big change. That's money that you could be generating, but because of the time delay, you're stuck. So wow, definitely
Correct.
changes my mind. Um,
Mm.
Now, what is one challenge that you face frequently, and then what is the solution for that, or if you have a solution for it?
Okay. Um, I actually just did I just actually applied to be a speaker for TALA, for one of the associations.
Okay.
And what I have found was, and something that I have been working on, since I can remember, because one, I mean, eventually I'm going to kind of, I didn't even go back into the in-depth detail. However, maybe that would be a question. I didn't really give too much of my background information, but I do want to give that because that's actually a very unique piece of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but um, actually, let me give you my background
Yeah,
information
let
first,
me
and
get this
then
background
ask that
info.
question again, because
Okay.
this is gonna kind of tie it all in together.
Okay.
So I was born into assisted living. Okay,
Oh, wow.
so when I was born, my mother and my grandmother, they owned multiple different facilities, adult programs, and assisted livings,
Mm.
multiple. They also own home health agencies, wound care, travel nurses, and things like that. We own programs that specifically focused on senior care and like durable medical equipment and things like that. So I spent my younger years and, just growing up, adolescence and everything, being in multiple different facilities with multiple different seniors all the time. And so as I grew older, then moved into leadership positions, working and understanding every aspect of the company. Um, After that, then I went off to college and I received my degree in psychology, of course, and my focus in counseling. And then I became the manager for United Way, which at the location was a not United Way. It was a community resource center, but we focused specifically on housing for adult programs. So the programs we did reentry, sobriety homes, transitional living, domestic violence. We had psych temporary supports, which was from when the hospitals, the psych hospitals, are in overflow, but
Mhm.
they were specific for geriatric cases and for focuses.
Gotcha.
And after that, that is when I became a state inspector. And so I became the state inspector, because and for assisted living and adult programs. So the way that it ties into the question is, and something that's been a common question or a common, concern is that when you are actually in key leadership management positions in assisted livings, right?
Mhm.
It could be small facilities, it could be the big facilities. Um, our number one goal is always to keep our census high, right? That's the number one goal. That's the push, especially big corporate. Corporate,
Mhm.
if your manager's not meeting that quota, they'll quickly go ahead and discharge them and try to find somebody else that can move in, which is definitely the downfall. Um, and that's how most violations are cited because it's just a constant turnaround.
Yes.
There's no
Yes.
consistency. Um, but being the background in assisted living and coming up and growing up in assisted living and understanding and knowing that there is a push because you do need to keep your beds full. Um, the revolving door always existed where state and trying to be in compliance with state.
Mhm.
So you're doing your marketing, all those efforts, you're filling your beds, getting them in before you can get them filled. There's something that's going on with the residents' care that requires us to discharge because of state regulations.
Wow.
So there's actually a training that I have just put together because why most people, especially the big boxes, have used me as a consultant is because there is really many people don't understand how to interpret the regulations. However, I have been developing a training because this is just what I've been providing consultation for, and I call it the best of both worlds, right?
Okay.
So I said the best of both worlds because I take the assisted living piece that I've grown up in, and I take the regulatory piece and I marry it together to ensure that one, you can stay in state compliance,
Mhm.
however, to remain and keep your census high. And it's really one in terms of opening the line of communication with your state inspector because what happens is most people don't want to speak to their state inspectors. They're afraid. They assume that when they come to us that if they say something that they're gonna, receive a violation or citation or they're gonna show up. And to be honest, I can't say that we no that we wouldn't.
Uh-huh.
Because
Uh-huh.
the thing is, if you tell us something that we have to investigate, we have to. However, you just have to make sure that you have, everything in place. But what I do is I provide education and training, giving past incident and scenarios and most frequent encounters and frequent events that has happened, and having people to understand and interpret specifically the regulation that is for it and think outside of the box of how you can meet that resident's need, keep your census high, but also maintain compliance.
Mhm.
And as a means to stop the revolving door cycle. And um, that is all of my clients, they call me on a day-to-day basis. They have a situation. They have a situation. And the first thing, well, we're going to have an issue. We're going to have to discharge. There are so many ways also with the social worker capacity, I'm knowing in my, there are so many ways to actually be able to keep that resident there and aging in place safely to
Mhm.
keep your census high and also maintain compliance. And the biggest piece of it is your documentation, your paperwork and your documentation, and ensuring that what the state guidelines and the regulations require you to do, in any aspect, that need is met. And I just find that a lot of people, if you don't really have that background, if you've ever been in a assisted living, or, for instance, most state inspectors um, may not have actually worked in assisted livings. So
Mhm.
they don't always understand what that constant push is.
Like,
Um,
what is
but that is
what
kind
ex
of what I have found for the solution. The biggest problem is, how do we keep our census high? How do we keep our census high, knowing that, we risk receiving violations. And I sit down, what's your situation? What's going on with the resident? You know, what outside home health providers supports can we offer to meet this resident's needs? How do we document and evidence every specific area is covered that is in the regulation and the guidelines to ensure 100% compliance? And just tell them, thinking outside of the box. I do situation scenarios. How do we transcribe that information to staff information sheets to make sure the staff has that information? Make sure that truly everything is documented and is there and available. So at any time that any question is raised, you're in compliance.
that's amazing. That's I never realized there was conditions where someone would have to be discharged. So that's something to look into. Like, off the top of your head, like, what's one condition that would require a discharge, for example?
Um, man, I've had well, so there's multiple different, there's
Mhm.
multiple situations. Like, so if you have a resident that kind of needs some care, like basically it's looking like a skill care and maybe skill care and actually do need a transition to a skill care facility.
Okay.
Um, Oftentimes I'll tell them, we need to actually assess a situation first. Now they can go temporarily to skill care. However, let's still, hold that bed with the hopes of that we can actually bring them back. But the idea is still to bring them back, but ensuring we're covering what's in the standard.
Mhm.
So, do we have an option to bring 24-hour caregiver in? Do we have an option? Can home health meet those needs? Do we have I mean, there's just a lot of different scenarios based on the situation. Can we Is the physician going to say that, that we can meet this resident's need based on the services that we can provide? And so a lot of times facilities, what they do is, they'll say, oh, well, you know, there's a risk to this, so we don't have enough staffing for them. We'll have to discharge. But outside of that, there's so many other resources that are untapped,
Mhm.
right? So your home health, okay, that's one. That's just one of the one options. We have so many different scenarios and ideas to think outside of the box. And in terms of, if we have a resident that needs 24-hour caregiver, a 24-hour caregiver, I've done scenarios where we have actually teamed up and taken two residents and placed them in a room with one 24-hour caregiver and allowing the families to split the cost
That's
between the two. And it's just, standing back, looking at the situation, understanding that families need um, in order to have that resident to reside there as long as possible. What are the options that we have to ensure state compliance, to ensure that the family can afford it, to ensure that that resident remains safe.
Mhm.
And it's really just not always right in front of your face. And what I find is most people, they're just doing what's most common. So staff is saying, your facility or your directors and managers, well, we don't have enough staff to do this. We don't have enough staff to do that. So there's always a push between your nursing department and your marketing department. Your nursing is saying what we can't handle, it's not equipped for. Your
Mhm.
marketing is saying we can make it work. and I do understand both sides of it. However, looking at other community resources and benefits that's available. And I'm finding there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of nonprofits that is available to be able to provide. It doesn't always have to require hands-on care. It just needs most of these things just need physical um, or just someone to actually physically be there to observe,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to 24-hour care. And there's so many resources that I have found. We've used students in colleges who are interns. We have used and it's not hands-on care, not
Mm-hmm.
hands-on care that's needed. But when we need 24-hour care, there's so many different ways to do it. We've used volunteers. And
Mm-hmm.
what they do is when the resident has a need, then they go and contact the nurse. So it frees up the staffing um and still meets the need and affords the family the opportunity to remain there in place. It takes a little bit more effort to do it.
Mm-hmm.
However, when it's done and a plan is put in place and it's perfected, it really truly does work beautifully. So you're not constantly having that constant turnover. So I just train people and educate them on how to think outside of the box because one, I'm also a major trainer for the actual service plans. So, incorporating those things into the service plan, how do you make them stay happy? How do you keep them happy? Yeah. And there's just so many ways to do it.
I feel like you can almost do like a whole nother like presentation or class just on like things that could happen or with different ways to tackle different problems. That's I'm glad to have you on, and I think we need to bring you on next time for another aspect of it. Wow. Okay. Well, how can we best contact or reach you? Do you have any kind of social media?
I do, I do. So I have Facebook, which is Action Over Words Group.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
I'm fine with
Facebook
that.
page.
Very nice.
It's Action Over Words Group, the Facebook page. And then I have my personal Facebook page as well, which I do advertising and postings and things about what we're doing, which is just Kimberly Rodriguez.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a LinkedIn, which is under Kimberly Rodriguez, which actually shows, the services and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because our services, we do a lot of other things. There's management. We actually do management piece of it. We do wholesale syndication. Um, it's a one-stop resource. So attorneys, realtors, lenders, and that's one thing that I love so much about our team, Action Over Words. The lenders fund there's no restrictions for the funding. You come
Wow.
to us, we do the business plan, and I mean, they do working capital, they do fire sprinkler installations, funding, and it's just so many different options. Let's see, I do have an Instagram,
Okay.
and so the Instagram, which we just started that, it's like action underscore over underscore words underscore group. And we just started our YouTube channel. Um,
Nice.
and the YouTube channel, it's like the handle it's at Action Assisted Living.
Action assisted living.
Hmm.
Yeah, we need to link up
And
and
so we've just started that. There's been so many people who have asked me about doing online trainings and things like that. So, a lot of people have been suggesting doing YouTube. So my kind of marketing, background people, they've been pushing me to do it, and finally, like, just started and getting ready to upload all of the videos.
that's awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely include all these in the show notes, and we're gonna subscribe to you
Okay.
as well. Action assisted living on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate having you in Assisted Living Rookie. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.